Welcome to another DIY project aboard Morny. As you've probably realised by now, boat ownership is fun sailing interspersed by a lot of maintenance jobs. Morny is still rocking her 25-year-old Autohelm system, which was originally put in when the boat was built. So out here we've got another set of instruments which pretty much replicate the same thing, and the idea of these is that the helmsman can see from the helm, but actually we're quite a long way back from the helm, so you have to have reasonably good eyesight to spot them. Now in theory we could have just kept the whole system as it was. It was working okay, although we occasionally had some odd glitches, but what we have here is sort of first generation instruments which run on something called Seatalk, connected into much more modern kit, the autopilot and the plotter, which operates on something called Seatalk NG. And to make the two things talk to each other, there's a clever sort of converter which does the conversion of one language to the other. But we've got a kind of an old network of cables around the boat. And of course, if one of these units fails, you can no longer replace the individual units because they're well past their use by date. It's a good use of time, and hopefully won't be too difficult. But of course, being a boat, to get at it, we have to take all the headlining down above our head here. To get at the wires, we have to chase through new wiring. But hopefully the system will be a bit simpler to fault find as well once we've got the whole thing set up. So we have some expensive boxes of goodies here, and what we're going to do, because these new instruments are much clearer to view, is we'll actually reduce the number of instruments here in the cockpit from 4 to 2. So what we'll end up with is one of these, which is the new I60 wind indicator. We'll replace this one, and then an I70S, which is a multi-display. It'll show you, you can configure it to really whatever you want it to show. We'll replace the SOG, COG, depth and speed that are currently on these other ones. So we'll just end up with two instruments here with a blanking plate to hide the hole where the other one came from. So down here, the three instruments will be replaced by our single P70S, which is the same controller as the one in the cockpit, which is the autopilot controller. And again, we can configure the screen to show lots of other information. So together with that and what's on the chart plotter, we can get all the information we can get from these instruments on the two bits of kit. Most owners would probably hand this job over to the experts, but what we've discovered here is that A, there aren't that many of them, B, they're very busy, and C, they're very expensive. So I reckon that this is potentially a DIY project, but I did pay for a local marine electrician, a guy called Chris Rothwell, to come aboard for an hour, and we sketched out a plan of what I thought we were going to do, and he was hugely helpful, and he came with a few modifications, did a proper drawing for me. And he supplied the bits cheaper than I could buy them directly online as well, which was great. And I know that I've got him, if I get stuck I can call him in to help troubleshoot, but at least I can do all the kind of relatively time consuming projects of pulling cables through and fitting the units and so on, and I'm hoping I can do it all myself. But the first stage of the process is unfortunately I've got to get at the wiring, which means getting all of this headlining down. One of the drivers for changing the instruments was this little device. This was a Raystar 125 GPS receiver which sat on the top of the pilot house, and last year it died internally, it corroded, and you can't get replacements anymore. So you replace it with the RS150, which as you can see is of course bigger and has holes in different places, so adds a new challenge to mounting. But this again operates on the Seatalk NG system of cabling, which this one doesn't. So this one, if we had to move to this one, we had to change the system anyway. So this was the sort of kind of catalyst, I suppose. In the meantime, when this old one failed, we were using the internal GPS of here but because it's inside, it wasn't as accurate, and we could see that even when you were stationary, the boat would be apparently moving at 1 or 2 knots around the anchorage. So this will be a big improvement. Go back to having an external GPS receiver to give us much better accuracy of position. So meanwhile on deck, I've used this template to drill 3 holes plus the main hole for the connector. That's the old one, and I've sealed the inside of these with epoxy so that there's no ingress into the balsa lining of the deck there. So this is one of the Sea-Talk NG. This is known as a spur, and this has a rubber seal on it, and it fits in only on one way, and you push it in and then turn it and it locks, and then that's going to be ready to seal. We now have no instruments, so it's the end of a fairly long first day, and it may look a bit chaotic still, but actually we've made good progress. So all the old instruments are out, the old wiring, all of this is to be pulled through into the next cabin, and that's all redundant. That's all the old stuff. The new wiring is ready. This is the Sea-Talk NG spur, which goes back along and feeds to a connector in beside where the main instruments will be. So we basically just have 2 wires, one from the starboard side, one to the port, going into that connector, and then the blue line is what's known as the backbone, and that carries the power and the main communications to the whole system. We're now in the mid cabin, and I've taken the headlining off here, and as you can see, here's the rat's nest of wiring that's coming down to this unit here. So this is new technology. This was already here to allow us to put in the Raymarine plotter. So that's going to remain. It's going to be part of the network, but a lot of these old cables are going to go. So we're going to start pulling them through. As you can see, I've labelled them up as much as I can. So one at a time, we'll be pulling them through, getting rid of the old ones, and working out how to set up the new system. We're now on the forward heads, and I've taken this cover off where the shaft comes off. This metal pole is the support for the mast, and behind it there's a grey conduit. At the top of it come a couple of wires, and they are the transducer wires for the depth and speed logs, and so we're just pulling this wire through from the mid cabin because that's going to connect in a slightly different way. The transducers, which are from the masthead wind indicator, the hull mounted speed and depth transducers, used to go all the way back along here to across the roof and to the instruments, whereas the new system is they all go to a central box called an ITC5, and we'll take the lid off. Effectively, you can see this one is speed, that one's wind, and that one's depth. It's the only ones I'm going to be using because everything else is linked in elsewhere. And then that links in through the Sea-Talk system into the main network. So what we're going to do is mount this much closer to the transducers and just underneath the mast. I'm very glad I got the AIS Raystar RS150 fitted last week when it was dry, because yeah, it's not very nice out there now. Having found a place for mounting this, we've now got to just effectively have all the connections for the 3 transducers, which are on these pins here, so they'll just need crimping on. And so I've been able to shorten the wires, so I've got wind coming from the mast, and then the speed and the depth coming from this trunking, and it's a case of just crimping the lines. And I've lived for years without a decent pair of cable cutters, and these are the best tool in the world, because basically you just stick it in like that and do that, and it just beautifully pulls off the sheath, so makes life a lot easier than fiddling around with a knife. And we then just crimp on a connector. And again, I bought myself a decent pair of ratchet crimpers, which are much better than the cheap ones you see in car parts stores, because they give you much better crimp power. So it's a case of just working our way through these. Once they're on, we can put this away. Hopefully all this is then done, and we can just simply put the cover back in and not worry about it again. I'm quite enjoying it at the moment, but it's getting sort of slightly tense as we're getting closer, because of course the great on switching isn't very far away, and hoping it all works. Okay, so we're at the other end of the system now, and this is the Raymarine autopilot that was put in New Zealand. Relatively new technology, using STNG technology. It was put in wrongly, as it turned out, by a main Raymarine agent in New Zealand, and with great glee, because they have lots of rivalry. The Australian engineers who came to fix it under warranty laughed a lot about how it had been put in and fixed it. So this is connected up to a backbone system, so one end going to the autopilot controller, the other end going to the main system, the plotter. But it's also connected to the old Autohelm C-Talk system. So this device here is a converter. So the yellow is old technology. This thing then converts it into new. So we're going to get rid of this. We'll disconnect that because we're no longer talking to well, the old system's gone, and what we're going to do instead is put in a normal connector, which is all C-Talk NG, to get rid of this, and hopefully then the whole thing is in one language. We shall see. I am 90% delighted because I've just switched the whole thing on. I've plugged the 3 new instruments in, and bugger me, they work. And the next stage is I've got to put all this back together again. I've got to put a blanking plate where the holes were for the original 3, so there'll just be one controller up here, and do the same in the cockpit. But really pleased with this, and it's not been as stressful as I thought, and I think we'll have a much more reliable system than we had before. Just got to sort out the chaos now. So we came back down to the boat last night and we've made some progress, but as ever it's always slower than we hoped. But we're in the final stages now of fitting the instruments, and then we can put all the headlining back. So the job at the moment is we've had to create a bigger hole. That was the old size of the holes for the original instruments, that's the new one, and then we've used the same hole saw to cut into these wooden planks, which are going to fit up there, and then that'll all be very tidy. So that's the plan. This wonderful black goo is Sikaflex, which is both a sealant and an adhesive, and on the where the screws go through I've actually put a little nitrile rubber O-ring, and that's going to just keep the wood just about a millimetre off the plastic so that we don't squeeze out all of the sealant. That's the idea, at least, so we then get a nice fix with all the gap nicely filled in as it squeezes out. So we'll see how we get on. So that's done. Just need to stick the screw the instrument down onto it. Looking good. So we've now got everything fitted, and I think it looks quite tidy. And in the pilot house we've got the clock and barometer polished up, a nice bit of veneer, and the display for the autopilot, which I need to work on, but all good. Well, it's a glorious day of no wind, but it's really nice to be out and having a play and just testing all the instruments. So normal routine with the wind speed, so get true apparent wind, basically no wind at all. But the clever one is this, so we've got a good sort of range of displays here. So at the moment this would be the sort of standard page, so speed, depth, speed of ground, course of the ground. We can then scroll through, so we can have a speedo graph. If you want to have this one, it'll show you the maximum speed reached and the average speed. This one is if we're navigating towards a waypoint, which I've set one up here. It's going to give us the depth and speed of a ground, course of ground, but also its distance to waypoint and the bearing to waypoint. This is a rolling road, which effectively tells us where we're going and how far away it is. And this one is really more use just really for checking GPS, so it's giving us detail, lat and long, number of satellites it's seeing. HDOP is the accuracy, time, and the depth. And then if we want just depth and speed, that's what that one will show. And then back to the main page. We can add more pages if we wanted to. And then down below we've got an alternative view of the autopilot. So this one again we can alter the heading, and on the screen it's giving us speed, course of ground, speed over ground, so the other way around. That crossed area is our waypoint. The yellow is where the wind's coming from, and that's the track we should be on between the two waypoints. So it's very easy to sort of work out where we should be going against a heading we've set up on the chart plotter. Overall, it all seems to work, which is great, and so we're not going to get a sail today, I don't think. No wind forecast at all, but hopefully tomorrow we'll actually get the sails up. But it's good to know that everything seems to be functioning. So.